Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for joining me tonight for my first ever album review. I'm going to be looking at the new Modest Mouse album, Strangers to Ourselves, which I just got this past Tuesday. And since then, I've listened to it maybe about 8 to 10 times, so I'm not going to say I'm an expert on this album or I've really had a full chance to experience it, but there's plenty of other reviews up already, so I just kind of wanted to put my thoughts out there amidst the other critiquers. So, yeah, first off, I just want to say, anytime you listen to a review for an album, I mean, it shouldn't be the deciding factor in whether you like it or not. I mean, just make your own decisions. Most critiquers are just a whole bunch of overcritical jerks, and well, I shouldn't say jerks, but they're doing their job. They're trying to pick apart the album or whatever, expose its flaws. I'm more so just listening to it with open ears, trying to get in the minds of the creators and just kind of experience it for what it is, take it for what it is. I mean, the album's not going to change. It's recorded and it's done, so all we can do is either enjoy it or not enjoy it. So with that said, I will say that I am enjoying this album quite a bit. And honestly, I mean, after 8 years of waiting, I was ready to just pick this thing apart like crazy. Just, waiting this long, I'm like, wow, I just hope this thing sucks so I can just tear it apart. And no, I'm just kidding. So I am enjoying it. It's a pretty good size album. It's almost just under an hour long, and it's got some really good variety to it, I think. So this is the cover artwork, starting there, and this is just a little CD sleeve that came with the Amazon pre-order that I got. And on the cover, it's an aerial image of I guess kind of like a RV trailer park type place in Mesa, Arizona, which it's a pretty cool little setup they've got going there. It kind of looks, it looks as though, you took the Modest Mouse hot air balloon and kind of, laid it flat. That's kind of what I saw it as. The CD itself is pretty cool. It has the typical Modest Mouse lines on it extending out from the center, and a moon. So I don't know what that's necessarily about, but I'm all for spacey things. And then it has this cover art, or not cover art, lyric sheet with, looks like, I don't know, Jupiter and Jupiter and maybe Mars, and then the moon and Neptune on the other side. I don't know what that's all about, but anyway, let's get to the actual tracks here. I'm just going to bring up the track list here so I can remember the order. So Strangers to Ourselves, that's the first track. And, that's obviously the title of the album, so that's kind of interesting that they started that, or chose to use the album name so early on. I've heard, some other reviewers commenting on how, normally in past Modest Mouse albums, like Good News for People of Mad News and We Were Dead Before the Ship Even Sank, the previous two albums, they typically would release or would start it off with a pretty bold track. I mean, Good News for People of Bad News is a perfect example of that, with the horn intro. I mean, that's just completely in your face right there, kind of sets the tone for the album. But I mean, it's really, the horn intro was not really a track. It was more of a sonic logo, if you will, for the album itself. And then, in We Were Dead before the ship even sank. They start off with March Into the Sea, which is obviously another kind of in-your-face track where Isaac Brock's just, you know, kind of laughing like a maniac. And yeah, so this is a little bit different of a start for a typical Modest Mouse album. You know, it kind of starts off with like some strings going on and some... It's a slower paced song, definitely, and you know, whether or not it's a successful intro, I can't really determine at this point because, you know, I haven't really gotten to know the full album, so how can I know if the intro is a successful, you know, kind of showing of what the album has to offer. I think more so they were just trying to kind of ease the listeners into it, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's just kind of a slow start to a rather energetic album, I think, getting into the later tracks. So moving on, Lampshades on Fire, that's the next track, and that was, I believe, one of the first singles that they released. I'm not positive on that, but one of the first ones I heard. When I first heard it, I mean, I definitely thought it was okay, but, you know, I wasn't super, like, into it. But now that I've heard the rest of the album, it kind of makes sense where it's placed logically. You know, it's definitely kind of like this album's dashboard, if you will. You know, it's probably the track that's going to be heard most on, you know, alternative radio stations and stuff like that, I think. You know, when you're going out to dinner at Applebee's, you might hear this song or something. Because I always used to hear Dashboard at Applebee's specifically. You know, they're trying to be hip and everything, playing alternative music. But yeah, so I like this track as a kind of like a starter. It's pretty upbeat, it's danceable, and I think a lot of people will definitely enjoy it. Even if they don't necessarily enjoy the rest of the album. Moving on to the next song, I probably won't go through every single song necessarily, but, you know, the first few tracks are definitely important. Shit in Your Cut, that was, I recently did a cover of that song. It was the first song that kind of made me want to do a cover off of this album. And, you know, one other review I heard about this song in particular was just saying it was, you know, kind of a generic sounding alternative rock song. But, you know, I actually like the way that Isaac Brock did the vocals for this track. I think the lyrics are pretty interesting. I especially like the part where he talks about the doctor coming in and the doctor's like, oh, I have just the thing or whatever, but they hadn't told him what the problem was yet. That was the line. Which I think kind of is a reference to, you know, maybe over prescription of drugs in this modern day society, something like that. Maybe not necessarily a reference to that whole broad of a topic, but that's kind of the way I saw it, at least. Yeah, and I especially like in this song the chorus riff, which kind of reminds me of some, you know, early 90s, like maybe right around 1993 when Modest Mouse would have started. Yeah, it reminds me of some, like, something you would hear from an alternative rock or emo band from that period. You know, sort of like a band like Mineral, maybe, if you've ever listened to them. Kind of like just a neutral riff that kind of, it goes nowhere, sort of, but it still sounds cool. I don't know. Hard to explain. It's got, you know, a lot of open notes in it. Kind of like shoegazy sounding. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I have to say about that track at this point. So moving on to number 4, Pistol. This is the song that I see being pretty much ripped apart by critics and just everybody at this point, seemingly, which is funny because I actually kind of like the song. Honestly, it has a weird vibe for sure. I mean, it almost sounds like someone who's about to commit a murder or something. Like, you know, maybe this could be the soundtrack for such a situation in some weird, like, I don't know, indie movie or something. But Yeah, to me it kind of has the same feeling as Tiny Cities Made of Ashes. Maybe it doesn't have necessarily the same level of lyricism in there, but I think it's kind of a funny track anyway. With Isaac Brock's detuned vocals, it kind of almost sounds like he's like melting or something while he's singing it. That's kind of the feeling I get. And it is weird. I mean, this isn't the song you want to flip on while driving around with your parents or something. I mean, they're gonna be like, what the. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a kind of a trippy sounding song. It almost reminds me of something you might listen to, driving home from a bar at like 2 o'clock in the morning or something when you're just wasted. Or something that you could listen to while tripping or whatever. I'm not saying that you have to be on drugs to enjoy the song per se, but being an occasional experimenter, I definitely recognize songs that are kind of maybe not necessarily intended for that purpose, but would definitely fit in that situation. And I think this one specifically sounds like a Shroom song. Yeah, so, not for everyone, maybe, but, I don't just listen to an album and as soon as I hear a song that I don't like, I'm like, oh, this is garbage. Like, why did they do this? I mean, they're just experimenting, trying to have fun with it, I think. It almost sounds like it could be like a Lorde song or something, with different vocals, of course. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with having fun. And usually by the 4th or 5th track of an album, for most bands, you'll hear something a little more experimental that they wanted to try something different or whatever. So this is not really out of place in my mind, and it's just kind of a funny track. So I'm not tossing it aside as just pure garbage that I'll never listen to again. Okay, so moving on. Ansel's the next song, which I think is a pretty nice song. It's kind of in a way, it almost reminds me of Wild Pack of Family Dogs. The subject matter is based around the talk of a family. I don't know if it's necessarily Isaac's family or what, but he mentions, this is the last time I'll ever see my brother, or something to that nature. So it's kind of a sadder song, and I think that we can usually expect some songs like that off of a Modest Mouse album, generally. I have to say that this is probably one of the non-single tracks that I enjoy the most. A lot of people are saying, oh, the singles are the best part of this album, and beyond that, there's really not much else to offer, but I don't agree with that, really. I think a lot of these other songs are pretty nice, and they're songs that I would listen to again, for sure. Next song is The Ground Walks with Time in a Box, which is the longest track on the album at 6 minutes and 12 seconds. This was definitely one of my favorite tracks out of the singles that I heard initially before the album was released. It kind of has I heard it being described as Talking Heads-esque, which I can definitely see. I love the Talking Heads and David Byrne, so I'm definitely a fan of this song. It's got a nice like bass groove in the background, some nice horns going on, and maybe it does feel like it drags out a little bit, but I enjoy it nonetheless. So yeah, so track 7 is Coyotes, which was one of the singles that they released with a video to go along with it. And I haven't listened to this song quite as much, honestly, but I do like the 3/4 timing of it, which is a nice break from the general 4/4 time signatures that most songs of this era are in. It's kind of one of the softer songs on the album. Let's see, what else can we talk about here? As I said, I don't really want to go through every last track, but Pups to Dust, track 8, that's another one that I do like quite a bit. Sugar Boats was, another one of those tracks that I heard people complain about. And it's like, really, that's just so expected for people to complain about the weirdest sounding tracks on the album. Like, yeah, it starts off with some, carnival-esque music that sounds like it's out of a, American Horror Story, the last season or whatever. Yeah, I mean, they're trying, some new sounds, whatever. Like, maybe I'm not going to be listening to this song quite as much just because it's a little more whimsical of a track, but I mean, you got to look at it from the perspective of, these songs are meant to be listened to kind of sequentially and as an album. Most people these days don't listen to albums. They listen to the tracks they like, Their relationship to the artist is what they can get out of it, what they value personally, not what, they're not trying to see the music through the eyes of the artist like some people might be. So, whatever. It's not one of my favorite tracks on the album, for sure, but I see nothing wrong with some occasional experimenting, especially on a 15-track, hour-long album. Let's see, what else here? I like the song Be Brave. I skipped a song, Wicked Campaign, which is kind of, it reminds me sort of like a song that you would play at the end of the night or something, closing time or whatever. Speaking of closing time, I gotta wrap this up because I only have so much time left on this video. Be Brave is a pretty cool track. It kind of reminds me of, what does it remind me of? It kind of reminds me of March Into the Sea a little bit. It's a very bold track with some nice, loud, noisy instrumentals in there. 4 more tracks on the album. God is an Indian and You're an Asshole. That kind of reminds me of something like Sad Sappy Sucker-esque, some like weird, just spur-of-the-moment idea that Isaac came up with. And then it kind of closes out with some nice songs, The Tortoise and the Tourist, and The Best Room. Those are pretty good closing tracks, I think. They're not ending on a weak note necessarily. And then, of course, We Know is the last track, which is a longer, I believe the second longest track on the album, kind of a more ambient sounding track. And I actually like it a lot because it reminds me of Radiohead a little bit, like something maybe along the lines of the song Codex off of the King of Limbs album. Just the way his ambient, or his vocals are kind of echoey and stuff like that. It definitely has a nice sound to it. And yeah, so that's my initial view of the album. I'm sure I'll have some more opinions of it later, and as I get to listen to it more. I've listened to it in my car, I listened to it on stereo monitors, listened to it on my nice Audio-Technica fit headphones, and I think overall it's well produced. It's I really don't have that many issues with this album. I'm of the opinion that it is a better album than the previous one, We Were Dead Before the Ship Even Sank, which I love tracks off of that album, but there was a lot of tracks that I didn't really care for on that album. So, and I actually like a good number of the tracks on this. I'll have to say most of them are pretty listenable. They have the mass appeal factor while still kind of embodying some of the traits of older Modest Mouse albums. Just the noisiness of it. Just the feel is definitely there. I mean, you can see the logical direction that they're going in. Trying to make it more appeal more to a wider audience. And that's kind of the direction you have to go, unfortunately, if you want to make some if you want to support yourself from your music. And I'm sure they could go on making angsty sounding, raw emotional albums, but I think we all know those days are kind of over. We're never going to get that sound back, and all we can do is sit back and watch them grow as a band, and appreciate the direction they've gone and how far they've come. Because these songs are amazingly composed. I mean, whether you like them or not, that's the truth. And for me, who makes a hobby out of covering Modest Mouse songs, they're just getting harder and harder for me to cover because of all the instruments they have and all that. So yeah, so that's basically it. I hope you will listen to the album yourself and form your own opinions about it. Just take mine as a supplementary opinion, if anything. And because music is about tying experiences to the music. Reviewing an album 5 days after it came out or 2 days after it came out, I mean, it's kind of a stupid thing anyway. I mean, there's no time to form a connection to the album. So, anyone that's reviewed it up until now is just spouting off preliminary opinions, including myself, I'm sure. Not like I'm biased or anything. No, but I really did enjoy the album. And I hope that there will be more stuff coming from Modest Mouse sooner than 8 years from now. So we'll see. But anyway, hope you will check it out, and have a good night.